Welcome to Quantumly Kinky with Veda, where we talk about sex, Chinese medicine, and character development for the multidimensional you.
Episode 12, Dirty Minds, Divine Desires, the Truth About Fantasies. Welcome back to another turn-on transmission of Quantumly Kinky. I am your host, SarahVeda, and in today's episode, we're getting into the heart of desire, why we fantasize, how to share those cravings with our partners, and how to keep shame from dimming our erotic fire. Our fantasies are portals to deeper aspects of ourselves, parts of our psyche, our emotional body, and even our spiritual awareness. But here's the thing, most of us carry some level of shame about our fantasies. Maybe we're just afraid that we'll be judged or rejected. Maybe we've even been taught to believe that something is wrong with our desires. But what if I told you that the fantasies you have are here to teach you something profound about who you really are? Let's get into it. So, why do we have fantasies? Fantasies are so much more than just mental porn reels or escapist indulgences. They're rich, symbolic expressions of the subconscious, windows into our unspoken desires, unmet emotional needs, and even our spiritual longings. Fantasies are portals. And when we pay close attention to them, we can access a deeper understanding of our own erotic ecosystem. From a Chinese medicine perspective, fantasies can even be seen as energetic impulses, manifestations of qi, or our vital life force, that is seeking movement, transformation, and expression. And when fantasies are suppressed, or worse, shamed, we create stagnation in the energetic system. And as we know, when there is no free flow of our qi, there is pain. The same principle applies emotionally and sexually. In Taoist sexual cultivation, fantasy and imagination are often used intentionally during sexual alchemy practices to move energy, to guide breath, and activate inner realms. It's not about denying fantasy, but it's about directing it, and directing it in a way that amplifies vitality and spiritual awareness. Modern psychology even agrees with this. Dr. Justin Lehmiller, a leading researcher on sexual behavior, wrote in his 2018 book, Tell Me What You Want, that sexual fantasies serve important psychological and emotional functions. This ranges from enhancing intimacy to managing stress and coping with emotional pain. So, why do we fantasize? Well, I'm going to share 4 main reasons why we fantasize in today's episode. And number 1, this is about healing past wounds. Some fantasies arise as a part of a reparative process. Lehmiller found that nearly 20% of people have fantasies that explicitly relate to past emotional or physical experiences, including trauma. In these cases, the fantasy isn't about reliving the harm. It's often about reclaiming agency, control, or power. And as psychologist Jack Morin once said in his book, The Erotic Mind, the most powerful erotic fantasies often arise from the places where pain meets pleasure. So, when explored consciously, these fantasies become tools for healing. These fantasies even give voice to parts of ourselves that never got to speak. And then we have number 2, and this is all about revealing hidden desires. Our fantasies often reflect what we crave but feel that we cannot express. Whether it's submission, dominance, group scenarios, or emotionally intense connections, fantasies act like emotional flares from the unconscious, signaling parts of our identity that are ready to be seen, loved, and perhaps even lived out. Lehmiller's research suggests that our most common fantasies are often about emotional connection, novelty, and feeling desired, not just the acts themselves. And what's interesting, in Chinese medicine terms, these hidden longings may even point to some imbalances in the heart, which is all about the shen and the spirit, or in the liver, which is about desire for freedom and expansion, or the kidney, which is all about sexual essence and fear. So the fantasy can even become a diagnostic tool, an invitation to explore where this stagnant chi wants to flow more freely. And then we have number 3, and this is all about creative self-expression. So much like our dreams, fantasies are deeply creative and archetypal. They reflect how our psyche processes life, desire, and the mysteries of connection. They also even allow us to push boundaries in ways that feel safe, like an energetic rehearsal for what might be possible. Carl Jung considered fantasy a valid and powerful path to individuation. He believed that the creative mind plays with the object it loves. So if our soul is flirting with certain ideas or imagery, it may just be a part of a larger arc of personal evolution. And in this way, fantasy becomes a form of psychic art. And then we have number 4. And this is all about how our fantasies can relate to spiritual integration. From a multidimensional perspective, fantasies might even be downloads, transmissions from other parts of the self, soul memories, or even parallel realities. There are stories across cultures of erotic dreams and fantasies offering guidance, healing, and even sacred initiations. So in this context, our sexual fantasies are not just about imagination. It may actually be the language your higher self uses to communicate with your body. It's almost like we could say that fantasy is the soul's way of sending encrypted messages through the erotic body. And it's up to us to decode them. So now that we've explored the inner world of fantasy, the roots, you might be wondering, okay, but what do I do with this? How do I bring my fantasies to someone else without freaking them out or feeling too exposed? And that's the next layer of the erotic journey, moving from private awareness into relational expression. Because while some fantasies are meant to stay in the realm of the imagination, others are whispering, I want to be shared. I want to be witnessed. I want to be met. And here's the thing, sharing your fantasies with a partner isn't just about sex. It's about emotional intimacy, co-creating safety, and allowing yourself to be fully seen in your erotic truth of the moment. And don't get me wrong, it can feel fucking edgy, really vulnerable, electrifying, but it's also one of the most powerful gateways to deeper connection, more authentic turn on, and even healing in partnership. So in this next segment, I'm going to get into the how. How do you bring up fantasy without making it weird? How can you stay anchored in your truth while remaining sensitive to your partner's experience? And how do you make space for their desires too, so it becomes a dance, not a demand? So let's talk about communication, co-creation, and the exciting thrill that these erotic conversations can bring to your relationship. But first, take a deep breath with me. So how do we talk to our partners about our fantasies? Here you are, sitting with your fantasy, perhaps for the first time without shame. Maybe it's been a quiet hum in the background for years, or maybe it just landed like a lightning bolt in your erotic awareness. Either way, the question arises: how do I talk to my partner about this? Because let's be real, sharing a fantasy can feel more intimate sometimes than sharing your body. It's like giving someone the keys to a secret room inside of you. Vulnerable, definitely. Sometimes even a little scary. But the truth is, bringing your desires into the light is often what deepens connection, turns on shared creativity, and even creates a more conscious erotic container in your relationship. So here are some ideas of how to approach it with grace, curiosity, and consent. Number 1, set the tone, but not necessarily in the bedroom. It's a really good idea to start the conversation about sharing your fantasies in a neutral, relaxed space, not in the middle of sex. This isn't about performance or pressure, it's about intimacy and understanding. You might say something like, hey, there's something I've been thinking about that feels really important to share. It's not something I necessarily need to act on, but it's a part of who I am erotically, and I want to be more open with you about it. This approach lets your partner know that they're not being asked to do anything right away. They're simply being invited to witness a more intimate part of you, your fantasy. Number 2, own your fantasy with softness and sovereignty. Speak from a place of self-ownership, not expectation. You're not saying, hey, I need you to do this, but rather, this is something that really lights me up and I want to share it with you. Be honest about how vulnerable it might feel. You can even say, I'm a little nervous saying this out loud. This is something that turns me on, and a part of me worries you might not get it, but I trust you enough to share it anyway. That kind of honesty creates emotional safety, and that is a very real aphrodisiac. Number 3, invite curiosity, not judgment. Frame it as an exploration, not a script. Invite your partner into a conversation about your fantasy rather than a decision. So you might say, hey, would you be open to exploring this fantasy with me, either in conversation or in play? No pressure at all. I just want to know how it lands for you. This approach opens the door for mutual exploration rather than putting your partner on the spot. It gives them room to reflect, ask questions, or even come back to it later. So remember, inviting curiosity, not judgment. And then we have number 4, being prepared for mixed reactions and also making space for theirs. Even with the best communication, your partner may need time. They might feel surprised. They might feel curious or insecure or totally into it. All of that is okay. It really helps to say something like, I want to hear how this feels for you. And I also know you don't need to have it all figured out right now. I'm open to whatever you're feeling. Remind them that their desires are also welcome. This isn't just about some one-sided revelation. It's about building an erotic dialogue together. And then we have number 5, celebrating the share, not just the outcome. Even if your partner doesn't immediately respond with excitement to your fantasy, take a moment to celebrate the act of sharing it. That is huge. You could even be breaking generational patterns of silence and shame in doing this. So give yourself credit for being brave and honor your partner for listening, even if the conversation continues in stages. Celebrating the share, because that's a huge win. So here's a little sample script about sharing a fantasy. Let's say your fantasy involves being dominated in a ritualistic, spiritual way. You might say to your partner, I've been holding a fantasy that feels deeply erotic for me. It's not just about sex. It's about surrender. It's about being seen and claimed in a way that feels almost ceremonial. Like sacred kink. It really turns me on in ways that I don't even fully understand, but it also feels really healing. I don't need to act it out right away, but I want to share it with you because I want to feel more seen and maybe eventually co-create something around it together. So notice how the tone here, it's gentle, it's personal, it's clear and inviting. This is a great way to share your fantasy with your partner and have it be received well. Because desire is a conversation, not a demand. And when you share your fantasies with curiosity and care, you're not just talking about sex. You're inviting deeper intimacy, creating energetic flow, and you're honoring the erotic intelligence of your soul. The goal isn't always to act out the fantasy. Sometimes the healing just comes from being witnessed in your turn on. But even with the most supportive partner, sharing your fantasies can sometimes stir up shame. Old stories about being too much or not enough. So before we go any further, let's pause and let's talk about how to lovingly meet that shame that might come up when you share your fantasies with your partner head on. As we know, shame is the ultimate fantasy killer. It's the voice that whispers, "You're too much, you're wrong for wanting this. What if they reject you?" But here's the truth, shame is not your enemy. It's just unprocessed energy. From a Chinese medicine lens, it's congealed qi. And it's often lodged in the heart or the liver. And the liver is associated with emotional repression and judgment. So in other words, shame is really just stuck energy. And the medicine you need isn't to push it down further, but to lovingly bring it into flow. Take a deep breath with me. Brené Brown, one of the foremost researchers on shame, wrote this: "Shame thrives in secrecy, silence, and judgment. It cannot survive being spoken." So when we name the shame, when we sit with it tenderly instead of exiling it, it begins to loosen. This is where erotic freedom is born, not in acting out every fantasy, but in fully accepting the fact that you have them. So, how do we transmute shame into power when we're sharing our fantasies? Well, the first step is using self-compassion as a form of alchemy. Start with gentleness. Your fantasies, babe, no matter how taboo they may seem, are not mistakes. They're symbols, stories, longings, and often survival strategies that once kept you emotionally safe. Clinical sexologist Dr. Patty Britton teaches that fantasy is the erotic language of the psyche. There's no need to feel guilt about your imagination. It's yours and it's sacred. As we know, shame, especially around sexuality, is often inherited, whether it's from religion, family systems, cultural norms. It's there. But when you feel it, pause. Place a hand on your heart or lower belly and say, I understand you're trying to protect me. Thank you. But it's safe for me to explore now. In Chinese medicine, this practice is like offering nourishment to the heart and spleen, organs that together help digest emotion and restore a grounded sense of self-worth. So remember, if that shame comes up when you're sharing your fantasy, use self-compassion as alchemy. And then we can even reframe our fantasies as sacred gifts. What if your fantasies are not something to fix or hide, but a form of sacred communication? Even the fantasies that seem dark, weird, non-consensual when taken literally, they may actually carry metaphorical truths about your needs. Power, surrender, worship, danger, release, transformation. These are archetypal experiences, not personal failures. Sexuality educator Jaya Ma puts it beautifully. Your erotic blueprint is your unique language of arousal. There's no shame in how you are wired. So by reframing fantasies as sacred codes, you shift from pathology to curiosity, and you begin to mine them for meaning, for pleasure, for wholeness, not judgment. And then we have creating a shame-free space for exploration. So before you share your fantasies with others, consider exploring them privately in a space of unconditional self-permission. Try this. Journal as a ritual, not just to analyze, but to celebrate what turns you on. My favorite, mirror work. Look at yourself deeply while speaking your fantasy aloud, gently, and playfully while you're gazing in the mirror. Erotic breathwork or movement, letting the fantasy live in your body as energy, not just a mental thought. And there's even creating art or audio recordings that reflect the fantasy's essence. That's what I do in Hypnotica Erotica. These practices, they can help us rewire the nervous system to experience more safety and arousal, replacing that old shame-based patterning. And from a Taoist perspective, this is exactly what sexual alchemy is, transforming raw energy, or our Jing, into refined spiritual essence, or our Shen, through presence, breath, and embodiment. And lastly, we have letting your partner in on the healing journey. There is such deep intimacy in saying, I have a fantasy and I've been afraid to share it, not just because of what it is, but because of the shame I carry around it. This type of vulnerability is medicine. Dr. Alexandra Solomon, author of Loving Bravely, says intimacy is about being seen and seeing the other. When we share our truth, even awkwardly, we invite authentic connection. So even if your partner doesn't share the same turn-ons and fantasies, they can bear witness to your truth. And often, that witnessing alone heals the wound of shame more than acting out the fantasy ever could. So remember, your eroticism doesn't need to be validated by others to be valid. But when you feel safe enough to let someone in, it can catalyze incredible healing. Shame dissolves in the presence of radical acceptance. And your fantasies, yes, even those, deserve to be held with reverence, curiosity, and compassion. Your fantasies are a part of your erotic soul print. And the more ways you find to honor them, the more integrated, alive, and turned on your life becomes. So, my beautiful QKsters, I want to do a little exercise together. I want you to close your eyes and take a deep breath with me first. I want you to imagine yourself standing before a mirror, looking at yourself as your most unapologetically turned on, powerful self. Notice what fantasies are shimmering just beneath the surface. Can you feel the pleasure of simply acknowledging them? This is your invitation to integrate all parts of you with love and compassion. And when you're ready, open your eyes and carry that energy with you. Whether you share your fantasies with a partner, explore them in your own ritual, or simply feel into their truth, just remember, they are a part of you. They are important. And they help you to explore more of your multidimensional self. So until next time, remember, your fantasies are your portals to your erotic magic.
Thanks for listening to today's episode of Quantumly Kinky with Veda. Stay turned on. Till next time.